Yeah.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center. My name is Quentin Ling. I am Beyond Baroque Executive Director. Welcome to the Wanda Coleman Theater. We're very excited this afternoon to be hosting Ansel Krut in conversation with Richard Nielsen. Yes, please give a round of applause. We are here for the closing of Ansel's exhibition, 26 Random Words Arranged Alphabetically with 26 Unrelated Images. I still have to read that because I always get it wrong.
Okay, me too.
It's been a real joy to host the show over the past few months. And we're also here to celebrate the publication of Ansel's book, which is by the same name as the exhibition. We do have a few copies for sale in the bookstore. They're all about it. Before we get into that, though, I did want to say a few words about Beyond Baroque. First, I wanted to acknowledge our presence here on Tonga land. Beyond Baroque acknowledges the wrong done to indigenous peoples through cellular colonialism and genocidal practices. As an arts organization, we are committed to uplifting indigenous communities, narratives, and their arts. For those of you who don't know too much about Beyond Baroque, we are Los Angeles' oldest literary institution. We are devoted to the literary arts, particularly poetry, but also to thinking about sort of language in all its artistic dimensions. That can be fiction, that can be playwriting, it can be memoir in some cases, and it very much encompasses the visual arts as well. We have our Mike Kelley Gallery here, named after one of our alums. Mike went way back here in the 80s. Some of his earliest performances were here. And the gallery really focuses on language. It focuses on certainly textual art, but also thinking about language in a variety of ways that go beyond what we do with poetry. We support the literary arts generally in a variety of ways. We have a reading performance series right here in this theater. We have about 100 events a year, which means every weekend we have readings, we have talks. Sometimes we have some performance art, sometimes we show films. And we have a workshops program as well. Our Wednesday night poetry workshop has been running continuously since 1969. Many of LA's better known poets have gone through that workshop. We have a variety of individual master classes. We have a Monday night fiction workshop. And we do a lot. We have a bookstore, of course. We also have an archive, which we just sold to Cal State Dominguez Hills. We've been collecting, it's a big deal. We've been collecting the history of LA small press literature, and now it's going to be preserved at Dominguez Hills. So we do a lot, and for the best of times, Los Angeles, California, United States are not particularly supportive of the literary arts. Financially, this is not the best of times. It's kind of a disaster right now all across the board for all of us, I think. But we do encourage our community to really support what we do, support the literary arts, support art. It's very important right now because as I said, we're all under attack. And so if you want to support what we do have a membership program. You can become a member here in the bookstore. It costs as little as $60 if you're a senior, $75 is the regular membership. We have levels beyond that. And it just really helps everything we do. It helps keep programs like this free. Sometimes we do charge for programs. Become a member, you get in for free. And so we really appreciate your support. I do want to say a couple words about some upcoming programs as well. Next week we are launching, we're celebrating the second Linda J. Albertano Poetry Fellow. It's a fellowship we established last year. It's for female non-binary poets, emerging poets. It's named after one of the great performance artists who came through Beyond Baroque over the years. So that celebration will be on April 12th. The day before, on April 11th, we have the artist Gronk here with the poet Gail Wronski and the poet Kara Kevorkian. And Gronk's going to be doing some live art where Gail reads and Gronk will be throwing his art into the audience. He's not here before. It's a good time. And then on April 19th, 18th and 19th, we have the International Poetry Film Festival, which we launched a few years ago. This is the 4th edition of it, I believe. And so we'll be showing poem-based films from all around the world. Digital filmmaking has got very cheap, which is a lot of people to really insert their poems in interesting ways visually. So come back for that. I don't want to say too much more, other than just it's really a joy to have everyone here on a beautiful spring day. Celebrate Ansel and talk about art. I'll tell you just a little bit about Ansel and Rich as well. Ansel Krut was born in Cape Town, South Africa in 1959. He has a BA from the University of my pronunciation, came out of University in 1982 after a scholarship to the Cité d'Art in Paris. He completed an MA in painting at the Royal College of Art in London. He was the Abbey Major Scholar in Painting at the British School at Rome in 1986-1987, and then stayed in Italy for a subsequent 3 years, returning to London in 1990. He now lives and works in London. Rich Nielsen, meanwhile, is an artist, activist, painter, photographer, and printmaker with a background in lithography and etching. Nielsen's painting practice is informed by his exploration in the expanded fields of printmaking and analog photography. From 2011 to 2022, Nielsen was the founder and master printer for Untitled Prints and Editions, which offer printmaking collaboration with artists from around the world. As well as his personal painting practice, Richard Nielsen has been a close collaborator and life partner to Lauren Vaughn at the Log Studio. So, Rich, really glad to have you here in conversation. So,
bravo.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Wow. That was a lot of information. That was really fantastic. Yeah, the language is important, and it's so nice to be. It really is really fabulous to be here. This is such an important institution and something that I think most Los Angelinos know about in some form. So it's really great to be here, and it's great to be here with Ansel. Ansel's work, I have been of an extreme privilege to know and speak with Ansel over the years, and we've developed quite a language together. And that includes, of course, Lauren, who is sitting up there. We have kind of been in a continuous art-related dialogue, art and life-related dialogue now for more than a decade. And it is it's a growing experience. It's always changing. It's always growing. It pushes us to think about what we're doing all the time. Our morning was filled with discussions around what is going on in the work that we make and how we kind of activate these spaces. So again, being in this space and having this opportunity is really exciting. And so I think today what we're going to do, I'm going to ask Ansel a couple questions, and then we're going to sort of evolve into this form of conversation that we have about images, and we will see some of this. But this is really about the book. This is about this singular, interesting exploration that's an extension of a studio practice. And I guess that's my first question to you, is how it started. What was the...
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, it's fantastic to be here, and thank you very much for turning up, and thanks to Quentin and to Lucas for hosting, and thanks to Lauren and Rich for hosting as well. I am a dyed-in-the-wool painter. That's kind of my practice. I go to my studio, I search for eternal truths, I do very little else. If I find any, Christine, I'll let you know. Yeah. But part of the conversations I've had with Lauren and Rich over the years it includes this sense of looking out of your studio a little bit, and then what kind of studio adjacent things can you do? And the book is one of those things. And I've been thinking about it on and off for years. And then there was a kind of curious combination of circumstances that made me think, okay, now this is the right time to actually do it. So some of those circumstances were technical, to do with process. Some of them were contingent because I was given an opportunity. I was in an exhibition where I thought I could have the book. And some of them were very much to do with the moment and how I felt language was being used in the moment. So those three things kind of coming together was what inspired the book.
Yeah, you have this very lively method in which you investigate images, and you go back and forth between drawing. And as mentioned, I ran a print shop in Los Angeles, and Ansel and I worked together, or several times attempted to work together. We never really kind of finished anything, because I think part of what I felt was needed was for you to understand what you were doing and why.
That's not going to happen.
No. You know, why use a flat surface? Why use the materials that they were doing? I was sort of imposing a type of material on you, assuming that that was a translation that makes sense to you. And so over the years in the studio, being informed and being aware of the drawings that you make, and then also aware on the other side of the paintings that you make, the book seemed like a natural step, but I also know that there was a lot of kind of struggle in trying to understand that. And I think that that's what's really interesting about this exhibition, is that interpretation of the understanding of what it is to make a painting or a drawing, and then to produce a multiple, a print, and then ultimately a book. Can you kind of address that thinking that then took over that, you know, kind of the method that you were able to sort of employ here?
Well, a book is a wonderful thing. I think, Quentin, can you back me up on this? Yes. There's something about the book, the fact that it is evidence of something. It's something you hold in your hand. It's a statement of something, and I always felt. I think a part of my working process is based very much on a kind of what-if principle. What if I do this? What will happen if I do this? And I think part of the book, in a sense, kind of built out of that same sense of almost random questioning. So these particular drawings are all work through the same kind of process, quite a particular kind of process, which I stumbled across 20 years ago. And every so often I go back to it. And over the years, I've built up maybe 200 or 300 drawings. And then I thought, what if I put words next to them? What will happen if I put words next to them? And then I just had to find a way to do it.
Yeah.
So I sat down one afternoon and wrote out 26 words. The first from A to Z, Z, from A to Z, as they came to my head. And I had quite specific, not really rules, but things that I allowed myself or didn't allow myself. So I didn't want to choose words that were too innately funny, like giblets. I didn't want to say, if I chose a word like giblets, then any image I put next to it would be infused with the humor of that. So the words had to be slightly free-floating. And then I didn't ask myself specifically what the words meant. Words were coming into my head, and then I wrote them down. And then with most of them, I assumed I knew what they meant, but I often didn't when I looked them up. And some of the words, I still don't know what they mean. I keep looking them up and then forgetting. I struggled with a few of them, like B, the letter B. I came up with brouhaha, which is a nice word, but possibly a little on the humorous side. It leads you a bit.
It's a funny word.
It's a funny word. It
Absolutely.
leads you. And then for the rest, I didn't, I had to stick to my choices.
Has everyone been upstairs?
Yeah.
Because it's...
well, we can go through some images later. So then I had 26 words, and then I just went to my pile of 2 or 3 more 100 drawings, and then tried to find images that worked with the drawings, but without trying to explain to myself what the relationship was. It was important to me that there was no obvious relationship between the word and the drawing. there had to be some kind of quality, innate quality that each contained, but not, it wasn't, they weren't an explanation of each other.
Yeah, that sort of is that question I have about how you make these choices, because there's you kind of have another method in sorting out what images you might try for paintings versus this. So this thing is a kind of was a departure for you in a way, or at least it seemed like that for me. I think for us that have studio practices, a lot of this sort of blends in together. So when you have the ability to have someone look at it and go, oh, why are you making this choice versus this choice? That becomes kind of part of this thing. And going with you to meet the young printing team that you used to work on this book, and some of the discussions that you were having at that point. Now the images were chosen to most degree. Then there's this whole other discussion that you have to have about how are they going to be seen, which I think it was nice to be part of that because it related to some of the conversations you and I were having about doing lithography. How does that image change when it becomes a printed image, and how does that image change when it's on the book and it has we had that up there earlier, where the word was next to it, and it has this cross-referential, and it really does speak to the drawing, and the drawing speaks back to the image. I guess the question of out of this is was that a process that was easy for you?
No, it was quite tricky. I've never been involved in printing a book before, and there were all sorts of decisions I had to make, because I had a vague idea in my head of what I wanted, but then was the reality of printing, the kind of paper, the size, and particularly we struggled with the edge. So if you look at my drawings, I'm sort of very fastidious about the edge of the paper. And I start off by putting masking tape around the paper and sticking it to the wall. And then when I peel the masking tape away after the drawing is done, you see the edge is very clean. So when I'm actually making the drawings, how the image approaches the edge or overlaps the edge or is cropped by the edge is very important to me. But when we were doing the book, the printmakers felt it would be better to go for full bleed. In other words, the image comes off the edge of the paper. And I resisted that for a long time, and it delayed the book hugely because we couldn't get the margins right. You were there for some of these discussions. And in the end, I had to realize I had to sacrifice something of my feeling for edge for another quality in the print, which is that the images in the book look as if they're really coming out at you. You really feel as if they're that much closer to you. So in a way, there was a bit of give and take around decision-making like that.
I think that process, so that makes me think about some of the choices that you make as a painter, and the sort of the fastidiousness around the edges. Often when Ansel's showing me an image, he wants to pull out a part of frame and put the frame on there. And of course, I read it different than you read it, so I'm not always in need of the frame, but you insist on the frame. And I think that's really important because, like, the book serves a different purpose.
Well, I think the frame issue is interesting, and partly based on my insecurity. Because if I put a frame around it, it becomes art.
Right.
Then it's like, then it belongs to something else. It's no longer mine.
Yeah.
And in a way, the book is a little bit like that as well. It steps away from me and becomes another object.
Book. Book.
Book. Yeah. It becomes a book. Yeah.
It feels, that's a really, holding holding a drawing, holding a print, then standing in front of a painting, and then holding a book. That they have real energy and spirit to them. And
but I also had to decide what I wanted from the feel of the book. And I often find I kind of look at the book myself every so often, and some days it just doesn't work for me, and other days I find I look at it and then it's almost like I'm much more receptive. And I think for me the mindset is I really have to feel like I'm in a dentist's waiting room. And then I pick up something and I start to leaf through it. And then I'm kind of, another article on the Kennedy assassination, Princess Caroline of Monaco. Oh, she looks good. And then I think, what magazine am I looking at? And then I realize I'm kind of tapping into some experience that I've had of paging through something, probably old magazines like Perry Match or something, where your mind is kind of drifting and then being drawn back to an image, and then you begin to find fascination. But it's almost as if I can't come to it with too many prejudices. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I sort of have to be open to the experience of just leafing something through and then seeing where my eye gets taken.
Yeah.
And that for me is kind of the book. And the book itself is also less booky. Mm-hmm. I didn't want it to be too much like a book. And if you look at the book and you just open it up, mm-hmm. you'll see that again, this was a design decision. We haven't sealed down the back of the book, so it feels almost a bit less like a book and more like an artist portfolio. So again, it's kind of slipping between categories.
Yeah, I don't want to ignore the images and the words, but again, I think because we're here about this project, I think the mechanism that you go through that, and you arrive at this as an output. Coming from the images is actually really important, and is kind of, for me, is often is the crux of this project. But I think it's also interesting to talk about how you have the kind of spiel of how the words are mated with the image, but in the studio, that's quite a flexible muscle. It changes as it's within your own time in the studio, putting things up, taking them down, and I think it would be fun to kind of also do what we talked about, put some of the images up and go through and see that connection, and hear it live. We can talk about it live as well. But I think the book turned out really beautifully. I'm sad that the final one isn't here, but at the same time, knowing that you have gone through this sort of this process to arrive here is actually really exciting and different from a lot of the shows that you have done.
Yeah. It's completely new for me to do something like this. I'm much more used to the whole gallery setup.
Well, and you didn't even want to call it a show.
Yeah, I prefer the idea of a display.
Right.
So the focus is on the book rather than on, the artwork. There is original artwork up there, which the drawings are in a vitrine, so you can't get that close to them. And then I tacked up some sketches just because I had to make it a little more interesting. Yeah, I have to show something. Can I just say, in terms of the book, I mean, I'm sorry there aren't books here for you to get. If you're interested in a copy, then please leave your name with Quentin, and then if you purchase it, then all the proceeds will go to support Beyond Baroque. So it's a good cause thing.
Yeah.
So what might be a good idea is if we just ask Eric to start to cycle through some images, and then if you see an image, or you see an image that you like, or you have a question about, just put your hand up.
Well, I'm going to like all of them.
Okay.
So I would just stop here.
Because they're 26, Rich.
I know there's 26. Oh, okay. Here we go. Audience participation. They want to see them all.
That's a lot. Okay. All right, Eric, can you just cycle through like 2 seconds an image? Okay. Can I just say I can't hear anything. So Rich has to tell me what to say. Okay, slow down, Eric. Oh, did somebody say go back?
Yeah.
I'm, okay, 5 seconds an image.
Yeah, why not? That's a good idea. Ablate.
Well, this is like school.
Yeah, but it's very nice.
But I
It's
tell
very
you,
nice
if
school.
anybody,
I didn't have ablate when I was in school.
I mean, part of the book is that it is based on an ABC primer. The idea of an ABC primer: A is for apple, B is for book, C is for cat. But what happens if there's no correlation between the word and the image, and then you kind of get that slippage of meaning? And I think the idea of arranging it in alphabetical order is kind of a red herring.
Right.
It's sort of, you feel, okay, order is established.
Yeah.
And then you think, but there's no connection between the word and the image. So then the idea of order is then that rug is pulled out from under your feet.
Well, if you do a search of artists' ABC books, they're all just ABC books. So sort of digging in deeper to find books made by artists that use ABC is very interesting. They're actually kind of hard to find. Man Ray really did a wonderful one that actually would fit in perfectly with this. But he used very traditional words, and maybe that has Next. I wasn't talking about that one. I was just talking in general.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Next. Cuspidor. Like you have certain shapes, you have certain body parts that you use a lot. You use often in your drawings. You have kind of a go-to language that that you use to describe almost everything that you kind of see, and the book is filled with that. You know, how have you? Next.
Okay, Eric, to cycle through them, I think that's fine.
5 seconds. 5 seconds.
Okay.
But heads, noses.
I showed this book to a friend of mine, and he said that's his least favorite
Really?
piece. He said that's what he expects most from me.
Florid. You know, kind of standing figures, figures in sort of rudimentary poses. Noses, eyes. This one's super printmakey.
Well, that's an etching. I tore up an etching.
Yeah. Pinocchio's noses. Inguinal. What's inguinal?
Of the groin.
Of the groin.
You know that thing that you see in Greek sculptures with?
Yeah.
That's the inguinal canal. Really? And that's where you get your hernias if you're a man.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Jalopy. What's a jalopy? No, I'm just asking you.
Know what a jalopy.
I know what a jalopy is.
I'm not going to say, because then you'll think I know what I'm talking about.
It's what Archie and Jughead drove to get a hamburger.
Exactly. Yeah.
Kaleidoscope. So all these words, these were literally just they came to you.
Yeah, I don't think I spent more than 45 minutes thinking of, or even less, half an hour. And I think at a certain point there was a sort of sonic component to
Manticore.
it. Yeah.
What's manticore?
I didn't know what manticore was, and then I sort of showed it to my kids, and they knew it's a monster, a medieval monster.
Okay.
I just liked the sound of the word as it came to my head.
I am one of those people that you can tell a joke to over and over again, the same joke, and I laugh every time because I immediately forget it. So, and words sometimes are that way too. The combined head is often shows up a lot. What is that? Like, what is the thing?
Well, I suppose it's derived from opposites, possibly, or,
Right.
or different things.
I heard yin and yang.
Something like that.
Yeah,
Possibly heads kissing or
Right.
something.
there's also the Picasso Brock thing.
Exactly.
You know.
It's the kind of when one.
Pettifogging. What's pettifogging?
I sort of know.
It's a good word.
It's what came. It came to me, Rich. It's kind of. I didn't question it.
Whistling. A little duck.
Well, actually, that's kind of interesting because it sounds like a little duck. It might be a little duck, but Quisling was a Norwegian diplomat in the war, and he was a traitor. So Quisling is actually a word for traitor.
So you didn't come up with you came up with your list of 26. You did not respond to any of the 26 by making a drawing. You just chose
no.
drawings. So it was
that was
purely an exercise in taking two and mating them together.
What was interesting about that was I had lots of drawings. I just had 26 words, which I'd written out, as you can see.
Yeah.
And then it was a matter of putting them together, but not looking for meaning.
Right.
And yet some drawings worked with some words. And then that became the interesting thing for me. Why does this drawing work with the word and that drawing doesn't?
Yeah.
And if we get a moment to kind of go back and then try to unpick some of that, then
Yeah.
I think then you ask yourself, well, then what am I understanding? Where is the meaning in
Toady.
the drawing? And then you have to find the meaning in non-literal ways.
Right.
And that's where it gets interesting.
Yeah. Ulurate. What's that?
There we are.
Oh, nice. So
Sorry. Just in my defense, there's a spelling mistake here. But we only picked it up after the photographs had been sent off. It's missing an E.
I would never know.
Yeah, because I am slightly dyslexic.
Yeah, I would never know.
Yeah.
But
Anyway, we repaired it in the book. I tried to change it in the book.
wastrel. So once you made your decision, your first 26, did you edit that? Did you make changes in the 26 words that you chose?
No, the words were fixed. I wasn't
Yeah.
allowed to make changes.
Okay. And then once you made the choices from your collection, were you making changes then?
No, that was kind of interesting because they seemed to find a natural fit. I had a lot of drawings to choose from, and I was literally kind of going through saying, that'll work. New word. That'll, no. Oh, that'll work. But I didn't want to search meanings out. I literally wanted them to kind of arrive in a fairly happenstance way.
Yeah.
Eric, can we go back to E? Because this is the one my friend Antonio felt he didn't like. So I sort of came. I forgot to ask him. Beyond him saying this is what you always do, it's recognizably yours. I didn't quite know what he meant, and I thought, okay, let me kind of go back and see what it is about the drawing that I like, that I might have chosen.
But he didn't like the drawing. It wasn't about the matching of the word.
It wasn't about the matching, no. But then I actually, as I spent time looking at this, sort of feeling, oh, have I made a bad choice or whatever, I sort of started to look at the drawing itself, and I think what, and then because it's, in a way, it's a book and it's made, I felt I could be sort of fairly critical about it, or sort of, I didn't feel emotionally attached to it. So I could begin to sort of look at the drawing as we would look at a drawing.
Yeah.
And I thought what's actually happening in this is you kind of get there's a sort of sweeping line that happens over the top of the head. It's sort of it sort of moves like this, whoop, whoop. And that, I think of this figure as a nun. I don't know why. And that would be her wimple. Wimple is, actually, if I'd thought of wimple, that would definitely
That
have
would
been
be
in
it,
there.
yeah.
So you get the sweeping line, and then you kind of twice, whoop, whoop, and then under the breasts, whoop, whoop, and then round the head, whoop. And then you're going to get the eyes, bang, 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 and then the nose, whoop. And then I sort of realized that what was going on in the drawing was that everything is contained within its shape, except for the nose. Right. Everything is flat, except for the nose. And what's the nose doing? It's egressing. And I thought, oh, so there is a meaning.
Yeah.
I just didn't realize it at the time. Or maybe I've constructed this whole elaborate thing in order to convince myself that the drawing and the word have some...
Well, what's that called that the humans look for patterns? We look for explanations for that kind of combination, which is a really interesting Is that what it's called?
What's it called? You'd better write it out for me.
That could be a word too. But that, we strive to find sense in these kind of things. And I think that's what, a lot of painting, especially later painting, becomes about, this sort of desire to find meaning in the painting, find meaning in that image, why someone likes or doesn't like something, both is somewhat random, but also rooted in that need to find logic. So
I think that's a very good point, because in a way I almost wanted that need to find logic not to be satisfied, not to be met.
Yeah.
So you sort of feel you kind of the drawing and the word are butting up against each other in some way.
Well, the adherence to the process of not making changes, of sort of sticking to it, and arriving at these places, that's like, that is forcing that thing to happen. Yet somehow it happens. It still happens, which is kind of amazing. I actually think, the nose poking through and distorts the a return of the way the eye moves around there is needed to break that up. So it's a completely I guess a normal response that a person who makes images would have. There, you have to break this system. Maybe someone else might read it kind of differently that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the time in my own images, I don't actually know. I don't want to say I don't know what I'm doing, because that's too broad. But I sort of have to be open enough to possibility. And if I look at this drawing, you can see some sort of these sort of slightly browner lines underneath the darker lines, which are the initial sepia brushwork, but they prefigure the darker lines. So in a way, they sort of kind of announce that something is about to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that what is about to happen is the nose. So I sort of like that. So the drawing builds into it its own kind of sense of possible moment.
Mm-hmm.
You have to ask Rich, and then he'll tell me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at here is the original drawings, not pages of the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
These originals, are they drawings, or to me they look like they might be prints?
Well, again, that's a lovely observation, because actually rather like I wanted the book not to be a book, I want the drawings not to be drawings. So in a way, the fact that they might be prints is kind of, it sort of lies there sort of slightly subliminally. They are absolutely drawings. They're unique in the sense that there's just one of them, but there's also the sense that they might belong to some other category. They've just arrived to the drawing category. For some reason, I just find that way of working quite attractive. In my paintings as well, I kind of try to make paintings that are so deeply embedded in the sort of art historical canon, but then I do something that offsets that. So they look as if they throw away or crude or, funny. But that's because in my head, they're in conversation with, all the people we go to look at in museums.
Yeah. They're all in the studio with us.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Do you have the images of this book?
Sorry, say what's it?
Do you have the images from the pages in the book? What do you mean?
We see when you found it out. I'm not.
The images are upstairs.
No, but side by side.
Oh, side by side, so you can see a comparison?
I just want to see the pages of the book.
Oh, well, they're right
So
here.
they're quite different. Can you pass the book around?
We can pass the book around.
Well, yeah.
Of course they're different. They're radically different, and these actually, this goes back to the beginning of the conversation, which is the idea of the difference between the drawings and how you migrate towards something like this. I would even say that this is different, even though these are photographs of the originals, these become prints in themselves, meaning this very thing. Upstairs is several layers of differentiation from the original drawing, so they immediately stop being drawings. You also do so many mark making in here that looks like printmaking, and that's by all likelihood because you've looked at so much printmaking, and you've done some printmaking. Do you feel that that's important to have that differentiation?
I like the idea of it being there as sort of in a sort of referential way. But I'm slightly against categories. So if the book can sort of hover around bookness, the drawings hover around between drawing and printmaking. Sometimes in my paintings, I try to kind of make them look a little bit like they're slipping out of the painting category and literally just held there by the frame.
Yeah, and you
So
will.
I'm not over fastidious about it.
Yeah.
Does anybody want? Shall we cycle through, Eric, until somebody wants us to stop at another image?
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm so curious about the way you approach painting around certain words or breaking the words down. I feel like you also painted the words. So I'm curious, how you thought about that.
Well, that again another nice question, because having got the images and having written the words out in a list, I then had to kind of think, well, what do I do in order to put the words next to the images? How do I write them out? Do I print them out, which would have been one option, or do I actually write them out? And I think what was at the back of my mind was to try and sort of work out what it is in an image that allows you to read meaning in an image. And that's very much to do with touch. Within the image, it's very much to do with touch. Within the word, there's very much it might be to do with sound or to expectation or meaning. So there's a kind of coded language buried in image making. And if you read the coded language, then you can come to some sort of understanding of the image. But it's not often what the image is, it's what you're reading through the possibly the process of its making. So in quite a lot of the images, you can see those abrasions in the background. That's sanding. So I've sanded down the surface. And I think what happens in those instances is that I kind of hope that subliminally you're aware that abrasion is happening. And then if your body sort of understands abrasion, you sort of sense it, but it's not conspicuously part of the construction of the image. It's just to do with the way the ink has been rubbed back with sandpaper. So that's kind of the kind of my thought process in these, is you understand the making of the image as being the thing that actually holds some kind of meaning. And then I suppose in writing the words out, I kind of put them in the same ballpark. I'm using the same system of, kind of touch and fluidity and, tonality.
But these were done quite a bit before these were done.
Yeah.
So there was a consciousness to.
I wasn't looking at them.
No, but there was a consciousness to make these, in a sense, have some of the language from the painting or the drawings.
And then certain things happened, like homeostatic is a long word. So
Right.
how was I going to fit it on the page? I thought, well, I can write it on the top and then drop it down the bottom and then make a picture of it. And I sort of felt I had to stick to a fairly rules-based system. So once I started on writing the word out, I couldn't discard the image. I had to find a way to make it work. And I don't know why I decided that.
But that's often the logic in your drawings too.
Yeah.
Drawings and paintings, is there's a problem, and there's a complex solution, or there's a simple solution, and you tend to pick the simple solution because it just works for what you do.
And in a very simple way, go back.
Ooh.
Go back to H. To H, yeah. Yeah. So here I've ended up with this dark sort of angular shape, and then going through my drawings, I kind of see, there's a leg, there's a bent leg.
Yeah.
Maybe that's enough, so that you're reading from that leg shape to that leg shape. Maybe that's what was at the back. I wasn't questioning it. I was simply saying this works.
Well, I guess that's the other step. So you choose the 26 words, and then do you then draw the 26 word pages?
Yeah. Before looking at the image.
Before you're looking at the images. So there's all these fantastic steps, that we maybe take for granted as people makes things or imagine things. But it makes for really kind of complex decisions and complex interactions between the things, because there's a interaction from the list to these drawings even before you get to this step. And so now you have constructed all 26 pages. You then sit down and start sifting, and the leg pops up.
Yeah,
because the leg corresponds.
Yeah, but literally, Rich, I wasn't thinking in a very overt way about why this works with this. I was simply feeling, yeah, that seems okay.
Right. So is that trained?
And then I would go back to it, like going back to it now. Oh God, it's so obvious now. Look at it, the leg. It's.
Is that training? Is that you doing this for this amount of time, that you have a comfort level that, like, some people would hum and haw over that forever, and but you were able to make these kind of decisions. I don't know how hard it was for you, but
it wasn't that difficult.
Yeah,
it was so much easier.
It's sort of poetic.
So much easier than painting. Laura?
Thank you. I don't want to interrupt, but I did want to throw out the idea that Joseph Albers, the color field painter, talked about the adjacency of two colors of having a simultaneous contrast. And I think that's really interesting in the book, and I'm experiencing it differently, and also interestingly in the slide image. But one of the things I wanted to say is that I see a number 7.
Yeah.
You see them as what?
I see a number 7 there. And so my head, when I see the number 7, start to think about, well, is that a kind of Kabbalistic idea? Or here you have this like disembodied kind of figures floating. And I know that, maybe number 7, maybe H is the 7th letter of the alphabet. It turns out that it's the 8th letter of the alphabet. So then I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe it's because there's a subtraction going on. So I'm mentioning all this because I think that there's a lot going on when you put two images together accidentally in the brain of the viewer that Joseph Albers was kind of pointing out with the exercises he gave painters to think about the vibrational color field idea and what happens when you put them together.
Yeah, I think adjacency is a fantastic thing. And to be honest, I sort of also absolve myself of any responsibility of interpretation. So if you see 7s in there, that's great. But it's not what I see.
Yeah.
And when we were going through the images, people tell me what they see and assume I see it too. And I just say, yeah, of course, even though I don't, because
Yeah.
I think perception and looking is totally subjective.
Absolutely.
But I do think that what we do share is certain kind of commonalities, again, about the business of, particularly through touch, and how that works in these images. And I think the process that I use to make these is I prepare the paper with a ground made out of which is a secret recipe. The trouble is, it's so secret is I've forgotten it. So each time I do it slightly differently. And then that means when I start to use the ink on top of the ground, I'm never entirely sure how it's going to react because I have made the ground slightly differently each time. And the nice thing about it is because it's a slightly resistant ground, the ink will float or be absorbed differently each time. And then again, that just opens up a possibility for making for me.
Yeah. And so, the drawing has that series of experiences. You put the two together. I think that comparative thing is really inherent in how you work and how you look at things, but also how any book will function. You can't help but yourself to compare 2 pages of words and then an advertising image that always sets you up. That obviously advertisers use that when they plan how magazines are put together. You spend quite a bit of time looking at these and making these kinds of choices, and that invites these kind of multi-layered comparatives. Makes it very. It keeps it alive. It keeps that image kind of alive and that conversation kind of going.
I have a question about the intent in a way, because there's something about trying to create something that's random. Like I just recently spent a lot of time writing some music notes that I wanted to feel like random glints of light off water. And you can't just make it random. You have to create the randomness of it. And you made choices about which things go with the words. And that's too close, that's not close enough. I mean, there's something, it feels like it's maybe a kind of freedom that is being evoked. I'm curious about the
Well, I think you pick up on something very very interesting there, which is freedom within constraints.
Yeah.
Because they're not really free. I've put a board around them for a start. They're immediately constrained already. Then all your expectations around how a drawing should operate and your expectations how a drawing and a word should work together. So it's again, it's kind of another red herring. It just kind of creates this sort of illusion, the possibility of it. I think for me, what I was kind of trying to flag up was what happens when you do get that dislocation between, say, the word and meaning. And that's coming very directly out of political language. So I remember starting this, thinking around this book, there were certain words and phrases were being thrown about which detached language from its meaning. So when somebody says, I misspoke, what they're actually saying is, I lied. But what they're meaning is that they're not taking responsibility for the word. And then the word just kind of floats off. So a poet would kind of loop that back in. They would kind of try to kind of find another way to anchor that meaning. And then it just became very curious for me. Well, what happens if you do? The danger of detaching language from meaning is that everything sort of kind of becomes meaningless. So that was sort of the sort of underlying sensibility within the book, I think. That's kind of serious. Shall we go back to something funny?
No, you know,
You've mentioned touch a couple of times, and it kind of evokes a thought to me. I wonder if you can talk about that a little bit more.
Well, I think the whole thing about touch in painting, as we've often discussed, is how it communicates itself. You know, I often find myself when I'm painting is I kind of test the brush on my cheek, you know, the firmness of the bristle, and I'm thinking, and I've actually thinking, what am I doing? Because once that the firmness of the bristle is transferred to the painting, then you as the spectator have to understand that. You have to understand that what I'm after is that particular kind of mark. If I choose a brush that's too big for the mark I'm trying to make, then you need to understand that that sort of thing is not quite fitting together. And then there's the whole idea of the perception of touch. So it's a bit like, it's pretty subjective as well. So, you know, I can use abrasions, I can use rubbing, I can use the ink and float, or it can be a fine line. Each of these things evokes a kind of sensation. But then there's the kind of curious way that sensation is understood and interpreted. So can I try an analogy? I'm going to try an analogy here. So say you're sitting on a bus and someone you love is sitting behind you, gently stroking your neck, sort of massaging and stroking your neck. That's a great sensation. And then you turn around and you see that it's not the person you love, it's some hideous drunk. And then you suddenly feel revulsion. It's the same sensation, but your understanding of it is flipped. So wouldn't it be, can you get that kind of doubling up within how one understands touch within an image? I kind of like that as a possibility. Again, it's the lack of fixity, the lack of category. That's the kind of thing that holds my attention.
Those are those goals.
Yeah.
You know, those are those goals to achieve. And definitely, you know, it's something, I think the evidence of touch in mark making, and I think what Roxanne's asking too is that physical sense of paper and or material that we hold in our hands, and that's something that we employ all the time in the work that we make, how we share it with others, but also then when we stand in front of it and we look at it and try to be both sympathetic to it and
because I think one makes paintings through, or drawings, whatever, through one's body.
Yeah.
As much, you know, it's not specifically just about your hand and your eye. It's actually to do with feeling.
Yeah, you were describing it earlier, and it was very much about the body. It was a body
So
experience.
you make it through your body, but then you understand it through your body. So it's in that kind of loop.
Yeah, I can't get the image of the drunk out of my.
Yeah.
But I think that's why I wanted to merge it there, because we touch, but it's also sensation, and it's all those subliminal levels that we feel through our body when we don't even know it. And so on some level, it seems like your choices are made from your skin
or your, like in your nerves or on a cellular level.
Yeah, and then but then there's like that component, and then the random component
Yes.
too. And the random component is both informed and uninformed. And the Picasso talks about the idea of like wishing to be able to be a child again, to have the freedom to no longer have to have that weight on your shoulders of making decisions as an informed, but just be free to make decisions. And I think that occupied space that we have that happens in a studio, which is can be carried outside the studio. I think again a lot of us practice both in the studio and outside of the studio. That's part of those goals, and it's part of how we, again, using a word or an image, combining them together, looking for harmony or disharmony, or the interactions between the two.
Well, this one, people, it's quite curious because people look at this one and they start with org, and then they see the double head and they immediately want to go to orgasm. So maybe that's just my friends. But there's an
Well, your analogy was a bit weird too. So
there's an evocation. There's an evocation happening. So I missed that, Rich. You have to say it again.
No, I just said that your analogy was a bit weird too. So
Okay.
or telling.
Okay. I think I tell you what. We've probably run out of time. But is there one image anybody wants us to go back to or something?
Yeah.
Rich, you have to say what?
I didn't hear that. What were you asking?
She said we didn't get to the end to see.
Oh, to see all of them. To
We could see it again. We could go through to the end again.
I kind of like this image. You can see in the background to the drawing the way the ink has sat on the paper. That's because I've washed the ink on and then let it settle. And then I've you can see in these head shapes I've rubbed back. So I'm working with working with the fluidity of the ink to some extent. And then having put these two images together, I looked up what refulgent meant because I didn't know. And I think Quentin might have to correct me on this. I think it means like glowing, particularly in the evening, like the glowing. And then I suddenly thought, well, the head shapes, they look like those symbols for radiation. I thought, oh, okay, I've been really clever here without consciously knowing what was going on.
to me, those look like the dyes that you use to put threads onto pipe.
Well, that's a very specific thing. Do you want to read Lucas's question,
yeah.
or shall we call it a day?
Nope. The final question comes from Lucas Reiner, who was not able to be here, and he asked a two-part question of Ansel. Let me find where it starts. My question has something to do with whether images can have intrinsic meaning, or are we meaning machines who search for and attach meaning to everything we see? So I think we sort of talked a little bit about this. Your alphabet frustrates that habit, but also allows for connections. Your process of how you arrive at the alphabet is random, but not completely, right?
Yeah.
I mean the image and the word pairing. I think about the Blake quote and how he needed to create his own system.
That's William Blake.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. How he needs to create his own system so as not to be enslaved by the system of other people. I know there's a question in there somewhere. I can't quite find it. Love, Lucas.
Okay. That's a lot of questions in one. But I think we sort of answered it in Lauren saying, "Oh, that looks like a 7. To me, that looks like a 7." And you said equally of something else. To me, that looks like
Yeah.
whatever obscure
Well, and I
mechanical
think-
thing that it was that you saw in it.
Yeah, there are many systems at play. You touched on the confines of drawing, the confines of printmaking, ultimately the confines of producing a book, which has sort of a kind of a permanent end to it. You know, you can of course go into the book and cut it up and rearrange it or draw on it or whatever you want to do, but at that point in time, the book sort of is a weird finish to it. Whereas the work in the studio and the freedom to mix and match and break the system using the, you know, kind of the alphabet as a bit of, like you said, a red herring. It's already disassembled. It's already not making any kind of sense, especially when you start to pair it randomly to words. And we're kind of like practice creatures. We're both creatures that create our own meaning, but we're meaning machines too. I think that idea of meaning machine is quite interesting.
Yeah, we need those things to hang on to. Otherwise, if everything is meaningless,
Yeah.
we're in trouble.
Yeah.
There were two images which are, you know, much more overt in the pairing. Like zealot is one, and xenophobia is the other. I sort of felt I could allow myself to kind of stray into that kind of direct correlation between word and image in two instances.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's too full. You know, you got to give yourself some latitude.
So
Do you feel like those two words were kind of important? They feel like the nose of it to me.
The what of it?
The way that the nose sort of like, you
Yeah.
know, that xenophobia and zealot kind of take us out of the poetic and into some kind of like,
Yeah, I think I sort of allowed myself to feel, you know, connected to the world through those two words in some way, and I just thought, you know, I understand for myself that the book is very much about not attaching meaning to things, but sometimes you really do kind of xenophobia and zealot and possibly toady. You know, they carry so much meaning now.
to use Lucas's meaning machine.
Yeah.
You know, we can't help but see, you know, whatever, you know, whether it's the politics or the current events or, you know, things that are out there in the public sphere and make attachments. And, you know, obviously this is a long process. You've been working, like you said, 4 years on this. So a lot is changed in the world, but any given moment when you open up the book, you're going to attach that meaning of what's going on right now and go, you know, zealot with the devil, you know, that makes perfect sense right now, you know. So
there's that word, pareidolia?
Pareidolia.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool.
Now, I will say, having hundreds of people come through here and look at the exhibit, and many of them talking to me about it, an overwhelming majority of them, and this show came up right after the fires, right after the inauguration. I mean, most people took it as commentary on
right.
like Los Angeles in 2025, essentially.
Yeah. And coming from London, you know, just kind of actually shows how interwoven all of our experience are. There's trauma all over the place, but there's also like amazing stuff happening all over the place, and you can make these kind of connections. And it's live. It continues to be live. I think the value of books and being able to open something up, something that has gone through the rigor to get to that point, can still be alive. It's pretty fantastic. So are we good? Questions?
Just like, how do you find meaning in words that I don't know the meaning of? It's just like the onomatopoeia of saying the word and then seeing the drawing. It's like, what does that drawing sound like? Oh, so
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do have slight synesthesia, so I sometimes look at paintings and then hear sounds or taste tastes. Particularly now that my hearing is going, I'm more and more, I'm not musical, but I sort of tune into the rhythms within images. And, you kind of see rhythms, you see patterns, and I guess that's kind of musical.
Yeah, yeah. And you don't need necessarily to know the definition of a word to appreciate the sound of that word.
Yeah.
And the sound of that word will obviously elicit an image in your head, and something conjures up out of that. So that's sort of the magic of what takes place, whether it's music or poetry or writing or drawing and painting, sculpture, dancing, parades.
Would you say that affect form really informs your decision making and process?
Affect
Yeah.
or effect.
Affect, like the
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing, because I always struggle between, the drawings are all about effects, but they produce affects. So what are the effects that will produce affect? I was talking about the sanding, for instance, or, using a clean line as opposed to a blurred line. We understand these things without thinking about them, and then you sort of respond to them emotionally. But again, it's all happening below the surface. I think that for me is kind of what's intriguing about it. Your understanding of the image is coded into the image in a way that you don't consciously process all the time, unless you go back. And Rich and I have stood in front of paintings for hours and hours and hours, single paintings, trying to get to that point of decoding.
Yeah.
So what is it that's producing this effect? It's our idea of fun. It's kind of, it's not everybody's.
I wanted to make a comment about time in that respect, because I think one of the things that Caroline said this week when we were talking about what do we need more of, and she said we need to have more time to slow down, right? And there's something about the pairing of these images.
Yes, absolutely. That's kind of, in a way, I'd forgotten that, but it's slow, because often, looking at images is habitual. You just kind of flick through, like on your phone, you scroll through. But if there's something that snags your attention, then it slows you down. And then your eye shuttles back and forth between.
And there was something that one of the really great painters had said, I forget which one, but he said that knowing when to stop something is what really makes a painting great. And what he was referring to is that then the audience looking at the work is needed to complete it, which I think also makes you slow down and spend more time with it. So there's something about the pairings of things that each aspect or lobe of the page can be separate, but together you want to puzzle through the meaning, but without it being answerable, you're left with the possibilities that your head is conjuring. So I appreciate that it allows for that slowing down, which
It slows you down and it opens up, that's why I began by saying I need to be in a dentist's waiting room, because in a way you're distracted enough not to be busy. You're waiting, and then your mind is floating. You're sort of free floating.
Yeah.
And then you're in that expanded space. Okay. One last question.
Yes, I feel this pairing between the word and drawing. But some relationship is not like a egg and chicken, more like a flower and honey. Which is for us is like both like affection. Both like very independent of the relationship.
Okay, I can't hear that.
No. Sorry.
So like we think like egg and chicken, which one is first? Now,
Oh.
but this like relations with both very independent word and drawing image, and it could be not meaning like as Mori said that comes from the sun, but both has like a very independent, but both have some kind of affection for the honey is not honey.
Very attractive.
Yes, bee going to the flower. It's not bee's decision, bee's intention. Like a more flower's intention to taking a bee to going to the flower.
Okay, I'm sorry. I need to be liberal.
The flower somehow draws the bee to the flower. It's not the bee, it's the bee, there's an affection between the bee and the flower.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so the image is like a bee and the words are
That's yeah. Yeah, I think,
But also
I think
the idea of the
that's
chicken and the
beautiful,
egg
yeah.
and which one came first too.
Yes.
And then the,
Not chicken and
right,
It's the bee and flower.
right.
But I think there is that toing and froing, and I think there is that thing where you have to shuttle between the image and the word, and then sort of try to find meaning or to unpick meaning or not.
Yeah.
It's also I think it's also kind of a weird affection and penetration.
I like that. I like that effect. Lightly touched, I think. Apart from Zealot maybe or Toady, I think there is this kind of it's a fairly generous toing and froing.
I think they all are like that. I think they kind of can't help but be like that. Especially as you abstract both of the word as image, the word as word, the word with a meaning, the word as a sound, the image as drawing, the image as so there's a continuous floating around, and because you've put them together, they're having a connection, they're having a interaction, but then even within the book, multiple pages can have interactions with each other too.
Yeah, but I kind of like that relationship, because in a way I sort of feel like I'm kind of saying, I've kind of made this mix, you sort it out. Sort of like I'm handing it over. I've tried to put them in alphabetical order. That's as much as I can do. See if you can work
Right.
it out. So yeah.
So there's an additional layer of poetry taking place.
Yeah, well, it's it's called audience participation.
Yeah.
You're reading.
Yeah.
I'm worried that we're sort of way over time here.
We're an hour and 15.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? So, yes.
So I didn't hear the question.
Why don't we go upstairs and see the show?
Sure.
So after this, we'll go up and see what and have more kind of personal and quiet conversation. But then after this, we are meeting at the barn to continue this celebration and the closing of the show and Ansel's book. The barn is at 10300 Santa Monica Boulevard in Century City, and you're all invited. And Ansel, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rich. That was quite.
And thank you everybody for coming, and thank you everybody for being such great humans, and all of us being able to have a nice conversation tonight, or today, or this afternoon.
We don't have the very finished version of the book. We have a few copies, but if you want to leave your name, they will be shipped to us, and we can pick them up later and etc. That's correct, right, Ansel?
Yeah.
If the book that's coming, does this have the white border?
That's it.
That's
That
it.
is the book.
Yeah. That is an exact proof.
That is the book. Book. There are 500 of those, and Yeah, they should have arrived, but